October 16, 1869. In the hamlet of Cardiff, New York, 40 miles south of Syracuse, two hired laborers named Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols set out to dig a well behind William Newell's barn. Newell had pointed to the exact spot himself, an odd insistence they did not question. The morning was cold, the soil heavy with October rain. 3 feet down, the shovels rang against something hard. The men assumed a buried log, or a boulder left by the glaciers that had scraped this valley flat. They cleared the mud and found, instead, 5 human toes carved in gray stone. Nichols dropped his spade. "I declare," he said, "some old Indian has been buried here." They kept digging faster now, and the earth gave up a foot, an ankle, a shin the size of a fence post. Within hours, the full figure lay exposed in the pit. A man 10 feet tall, lying on his back, one hand clutched across his abdomen, his face frozen in what looked like agony. He weighed nearly 3,000 pounds. His skin was the color of old ash. Every muscle, every rib, every strained tendon had been preserved in stone. Word ran up the dirt lane before noon. Neighbors abandoned their chores and crowded the barnyard, hats off, voices low. Some knelt. A local woman fainted at the edge of the hole. Farmers who had never traveled beyond the county line stood staring at a giant that seemed to have slept beneath their fields since the beginning of the world. By evening, William Newell's quiet farm had become a shrine, and the 12-mile road from Syracuse was already filling with lanterns. No one in that crowd knew the figure had been carved by human hands, aged with acid, and lowered into the ground exactly 1 year before. They knew only what they could see. A stone man, impossibly old, impossibly large, waiting in the dark. And they wanted to believe tomorrow all of upstate New York would come to see him, and someone had already begun to think about how to charge them for the look. By the second day, the road to Cardiff was a river of wagons. Farmers came from Tully, Lafayette, and Onondaga. Clerks and shopkeepers boarded the trains at Syracuse and rode south to the little station at Tully, then walked the last miles on foot. William Newell understood at once what he was holding. He pitched a canvas tent over the pit, hired a gatekeeper, and posted a price, 50 cents, to stand at the edge and look down at the giant. Within a week, he raised it to $1. The money came in faster than anyone in Onondaga County had ever seen. On a single Sunday, more than 3,000 people paid to file past the hole. Refreshment stands sprang up along the lane. Boys sold cider and gingerbread. A stagecoach line added special runs from Syracuse, and the railroad printed extra tickets. In 2 weeks, the giant earned Newell somewhere near $7,000. A fortune. In a year when a laborer made $1 a day. The visitors did not come for a carnival. They came in reverence. They removed their hats at the tent flap. They lowered their voices. Ministers arrived with their congregations and stood weeping at the rim. A woman from Syracuse pressed her child forward and told him he was looking at one of the giants from the book of Genesis. Men who had fought at Gettysburg 5 years earlier said they had never seen anything that stopped their breath like this. Newspapers carried the story to New York, Boston, and beyond. Reporters called Cardiff the most talked about place in America. The New York papers sent correspondents. Photographers set up tripods and sold prints of the figure by the hundreds. A muddy farm at the bottom of a quiet valley had become, in 10 days, a national event. But wonder invites argument. As the crowd swelled, so did the questions. Was this a fossil? A statue? A miracle? Preachers and professors were already boarding trains toward Cardiff, each certain the giant would prove exactly what they believed. The giant arrived in a country primed to believe in him. In 1869, most Americans read the Bible as literal history, and Genesis was explicit. There were giants in the earth in those days. Here, it seemed, was the proof. Lifted out of a New York well pit, clergymen preached sermons on the Cardiff figure within days of its discovery. A Methodist minister declared it beyond question the petrified body of one of the ancient men named in Scripture. To doubt the giant, some said, was to doubt the word itself. But not everyone knelt. Curious men of science came to Cardiff too, and they did not like what they saw. The figure lay in a bed of blue clay and gravel, soil that could not have preserved flesh into stone. Human bodies do not petrify. And the anatomy was wrong. The proportions were off, the surface too smooth in places, too crude in others. Some visitors noticed faint grooves running in parallel lines across the back, as if a tool had dragged over the stone. Andrew Dixon White, the president of the New Cornell University, traveled down to see it and came away convinced it was a statue, not a fossil. Geologists muttered about gypsum, a soft mineral that no ancient river could have shaped into a man. Yet for every skeptic, 10 believers pressed forward with tears in their eyes, and the money kept flowing through Newell's tent. So the nation split. In pulpits and parlors, in newspaper columns and railway cars, Americans argued over what lay in the pit at Cardiff. Was it a miracle that confirmed the book of Genesis? A fossil that rewrote human history? Or a fraud? And if so, whose and why? The debate ran from upstate villages to the editorial pages of the great city dailies. What almost no one asked was the simplest question of all. Who would go to the trouble of carving a 10-foot man and burying him in a field? The answer was a cigar maker from Binghamton, and his reasons went back more than a year. His name was George Hull, and he did not believe in giants. A cigar manufacturer from Binghamton, New York, Hull was a tall, restless man in his 40s, an atheist by conviction, in an age when that was a dangerous thing to admit. In the summer of 1866, he traveled to Ackley, Iowa, to visit his sister, and stayed the night at the home of a Methodist revivalist named Turk. Over the dinner table, the two men fell into an argument that would change American history. The subject was Scripture, specifically the passage in Genesis about giants who once walked the earth. The preacher insisted every word was literal fact. Hull scoffed. They argued late into the night, neither yielding, and Hull left the house sleepless and furious. Lying awake, he began to wonder just how far people would go to believe such a thing. What if he gave them a giant to believe in? What if he could prove, with one enormous trick, how easily faith could be sold? The idea took hold and would not let go. Hull decided to carve a colossal stone man, bury it, let it be, discovered, and watch the country flock to worship a lie of his own making. It was equal parts revenge against the preachers, a private experiment in human credulity, and, Hull being a businessman, a scheme to make a great deal of money. But such a hoax would cost him. He would need years, secrecy, and a small fortune he did not entirely have. He needed the right stone, the right craftsman, and a way to move tons of rock across half the country without a single loose word. Most of all, he needed material that could pass, to a trusting eye, for ancient petrified flesh. Hull thought he knew where to find it. Somewhere in the gypsum beds of Fort Dodge, Iowa, there was a block of pale stone, waiting to become a giant. In 1868, he set out to quarry it, and the most elaborate hoax in American history began to take physical shape. In the summer of 1868, Hull and a hired crew went to work in the gypsum beds south of Fort Dodge, Iowa. Cutting the block was brutal labor. They finally freed a slab roughly 11 feet long and weighing nearly 5 tons, then faced the problem of moving it. The wagon sank to its axles. They had to widen the road, build a special reinforced cart, and haul the stone 40 miles to the nearest rail depot, where startled bystanders were told it was a monument bound for Washington. The block rode the rails to Chicago. There, behind the locked doors of a barn, Hull hired a German stonecutter named Edward Burkhardt and swore him and 2 assistants to secrecy. Working from Hull's own body as a rough model, they carved a naked man 10 feet 4 inches tall, lying on his back, one hand pressed to his stomach as if he had died in pain. Hull ordered the face left vague and worn, ancient rather than sculpted. Then came the aging. A smooth new statue would fool no one, so Hull attacked his own creation. The men rubbed the surface with sand and water to wear away the fresh tool marks. They washed it in sulfuric acid to darken and pit the stone, giving it the dull, weathered look of great age. To imitate the pores of human skin, Hull had the surface beaten all over with a mallet studded with darning needles. Thousands of tiny punctures hammered into the gypsum until it looked porous and lifelike. The whole enterprise cost Hull roughly $2,600, a staggering sum and nearly a year of scheming. He had bled money, sworn men to silence, and shipped 5 tons of doctored stone across the country under a false story. Now he owned a 10-foot lie, blind-eyed and acid-stained, lying in a Chicago barn. But a buried giant is only powerful if it stays buried until the right moment. Hull created the figure, and under cover of darkness pointed it east, toward a quiet farm in Cardiff, and a hole that would wait a full year before anyone was allowed to find it. By November 1868, the carving is done. Behind Edward Burghart's locked Chicago workshop, the 10-foot figure lies finished, 3,000 pounds of Fort Dodge gypsum, its surface bathed in sulfuric acid to fake the bruise of centuries, its skin stippled with darning needles to counterfeit human pores. George Hull crates it in a massive wooden box, labels the freight vaguely, and sends it east by rail. The bill for the journey so far runs past $2,600. A small fortune, most of Hull's savings, spent on a single lie he has not yet told. The box travels the New York Central line to Union, New York, then transfers to the farm of William Newell, Hull's cousin, near the village of Cardiff. Newell is in on it. On a November night, with the neighbors asleep, the 2 men wrestle the crate off the wagon behind Newell's barn. They dig by lantern light, a pit 3 feet deep in the heavy clay, and lower the giant in on its side, knees slightly drawn, one arm crossed over the belly as if the earth had caught it sleeping. They shovel the soil back, tamp it down, scatter dead leaves, and let a New York winter erase the scene. Then Hull does the hardest thing of all. He waits. For nearly a year the giant lies underground, curing in the wet ground, while grass grows over the disturbed earth and the story is allowed to age like the fake it is. Hull understands what a fresh hole would betray. Patience is part of the forgery. He returns to Binghamton, to his cigars and his ledgers, and lets the calendar do his lying for him. Spring, summer, another harvest, until the ground looks as though nothing has ever touched it. Only in October 1869 does he give the signal. Newell hires 2 men, William Nichols and Henry Nichols, to dig a well in one precise spot behind the barn, where no sensible farmer would ever place one. The shovels go down, and 100 miles away, better trained eyes are already sharpening their questions. The crowds bring their wonder to Cardiff. The scientists bring rulers. As autumn deepens in 1869, the trickle of scholars into Newell's tent becomes a problem for George Hull. Faith does not examine tool marks. Geology does. The first blows land quietly. State geologists study the figure and note what no petrified man should show. The giant is carved from gypsum, a soft mineral that dissolves in groundwater. Buried in wet New York clay for the ages the preachers claimed, it would have melted to nothing. The chemistry is impossible. A body cannot fossilize into a stone that water eats. Then comes the man who ends it. Othniel Charles Marsh, professor of paleontology at Yale, arrives at the pit and climbs down to the giant with a scientist's cold curiosity. He does not need long. He runs his eyes over the surface and finds them everywhere. Fine, fresh grooves left by a carver's tools, glinting where true weathering should have dulled them. He sees the acid staining that only mimics age. He notes the sharp, unworn edges of a thing that has been in the ground months, not millennia. Marsh delivers his verdict in words that travel faster than any wagon. The Cardiff Giant is of very recent origin and a decided humbug. The phrase is fatal. A Yale professor has put his name against the miracle, and the newspapers that sold the wonder now sell the doubt. Reporters begin retracing the Giant's journey backward. A heavy crate seen on a wagon the year before, freight records at Union, a stonecutter in Chicago who will not quite meet the eye. The trail runs, inch by inch, toward Binghamton, and a cigar maker named Hull. But even as the science closes in, the Giant is about to make its owners richer than ever. Because, in America, being exposed as a fake is not the end of a spectacle. Sometimes it is only the beginning. A showman in Bridgeport has been watching the crowds and the receipts, and he is about to fake the fake. Even branded a humbug, the Giant is a gold mine. In late October 1869, a syndicate of Syracuse businessmen, led by banker David Hannum, buys a 3/4 share for a reported $30,000, an enormous sum for a lump of gypsum, and moves the figure to Syracuse where the paying crowds grow larger still. Exposure has not killed the attraction, it has advertised it. Then Phineas Taylor Barnum takes an interest. The greatest showman in America travels to see the Giant, offers Hannum's syndicate around $60,000 to buy or lease it, and is turned down flat. Barnum does not sulk. He hires his own carvers, has them build an exact plaster copy of the Cardiff Giant, and puts it on display in his New York museum, announcing that his giant is the real one, and the Syracuse figure is the imitation. A fake of a fake, marketed with a straight face. And it works. Barnum's copy, backed by his genius for publicity, draws crowds that rival and outdraw the original. Two counterfeits now compete for the same gullible public, each calling the other a fraud. It is here, in the fury over which fake is genuine, that America receives one of its most enduring lines. David Hannum, watching Barnum siphon off his customers, is said to have grumbled that there's a sucker born every minute, a jab at the crowds paying to see Barnum's copy. History would misremember the words and hand them to Barnum himself, which is perhaps the most fitting theft of all. The lawsuit follows. Hannum's syndicate sues Barnum for calling their giant a fake, and the court, with devastating logic, refuses to help. A judge will not protect one hoax from being called a hoax by another. To win, the plaintiffs would have to prove their giant was real, and their giant was gypsum. The absurdity has nowhere left to climb. Two fakes, one lawsuit, a nation laughing at itself, and in Binghamton, the man who started it all decides it is time to tell the truth, under oath. In December 1869, George Hull stops running from his own creation and claims it. Cornered by reporters, undone by Marsh's verdict and the freight records, he confesses, and then, called before the law, he swears to the whole design under oath. He names Fort Dodge, where he quarried the 5-ton gypsum block. He names Edward Burghardt, the Chicago stonecutter. He describes the acid, the darning needles, the year of waiting in the Cardiff clay. He even reveals the reason: a heated argument with a Methodist preacher over the giants of Genesis, and a skeptic's determination to prove how much a believing nation could be made to swallow. He spent well over $2,000 to win a theological argument with a rock. The confession settles the science and the joke at once. There was no ancient man, no fossil, no miracle in the earth. Only gypsum and theater, a statue carved for one purpose and buried for another. The crowds who wept and prayed at the pit had knelt before a cigar maker's grudge. And yet the giant does not die with its exposure. That is the strangest part. Stripped of its mystery, it becomes a relic of the mystery, passed from owner to owner, displayed at fairs, nearly forgotten, until it comes at last to rest in the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York, where it lies today. People still pay to look at it. They come now to see not a giant, but a lie so beautifully told that a whole country believed it, and half of them wanted to. Because that is the real fossil the Cardiff Giant left behind. Not a body, but a truth about its audience. A nation eager for wonders, ready to pay 50 cents for a miracle and $60,000 for its copy, will always find someone willing to carve the miracle to order. The stone itself is fake. The hunger was always real. And in the end, that hunger is the whole story. America buried its giant to sell a lie.